I'm Clover, and this is Loop. This is the Love It or Leave It podcast. Quick update on our move and our living situation. Whole family is here in Toronto, officially. We have started our lease on our new house, and we're basically moved in at this point, which is really cool because I can't really settle down until all the back boxes and stuff are unpacked. So we're making real progress. It's really starting to feel like home here. Shout out to all the new subscribers. We've gotten like 40-ish or maybe a little more since our last podcast. So welcome to all the new people and, tell everybody you know. Today we're going to touch on two big topics. One is Canadian service culture, which is really different than the US. And the other is how we've been welcomed as guests in Canada as American political refugees.
First topic today, welcome to the land of face-to-face everything. That is something that we weren't expecting. That has become a continuing theme in our Canadian adventures, and that is that a lot more business and personal everything just happens in person. I understood that moving here, I'd have to go to government offices and get paperwork done. Like, that's not a shocking surprise in the US. Sometimes you gotta show up at the DMV. But I have been surprised consistently by how often we have to go actually have face-to-face conversations and transactions with people to just get basic business done. Maybe the most striking example was something as simple as getting a storage unit. I've gotten storage units in the US. I've gotten storage units now in Canada. Completely different experience. In the US, they almost go out of their way to make sure you never have to interact with a human being. You get your gate codes and your unit number, and they leave a key to your unit inside your unit. It's almost like shameful renting. Well, here, it's almost like signing a mortgage. You go and there's this bundle of paperwork, and they take you on a tour of your unit and give you your key and all of that. And I was really unprepared for that. I like people. I happen to be one of those people who like people. So I typically don't mind having to interface with people, but there are definitely a lot of Americans who don't feel that way. And it's if I can do this without dealing with a person, I would prefer to not deal with a person. By and large, I have enjoyed the people who have been helping me out step by step through all these processes.
I think one of the things that has stood out to me about face-to-face interactions, at least here in Toronto, is that it's not always necessary. It's just usually much easier. I feel like it's flipped in the US, that maybe during COVID, we all took that as an excuse to just automate everything that we can, which resulted probably in a lot of people not having jobs, being replaced by robots and whatnot. And that hasn't really happened here. So you can automate some stuff, but other things just, there's no way. Have you talked about Service Canada and Service Ontario?
No, not yet.
This is like the DMV of Canada, except that it's for all social services. And in Canada, there's a lot more of those than in the US.
Yeah, that was something I was expecting. To get into their healthcare system, we had to go to Service Ontario because that's a provincial program. There's also Service Canada, which handles the national program. So I had to go in person to Service Canada when I was trying to sort out getting my social insurance number, which I actually have not sorted out yet. I was referred for some sort of secondary screening that has quite the backlog. So I am told that it'll happen for me. But yes, I went into Service Canada and was like, hey, could you check on the status? They're like, yep, still happening.
Everybody seems unalarmed.
No one seems to care. I'm like, I really need this so I can start banking here and giving you taxes and things. So it is in your interest to give me this number. So there have been at least a couple of items that we had to go in person for to sort things out. One was the bank.
There are automated processes. For example, if you want to open an account at CIBC, you can do that online, all the way through to the end. But I can't because I'm a newcomer to Canada. And so whatever developer who who wrote the software, there's no error message for this can't be finished because you're from the US. And so, yes, definitely had to go into the bank. There was no other choice. And it was a identity verification.
Another one, businesses that exist in the US and businesses that exist in Canada, you're not necessarily the same person to them. Like Costco was an example. We were able to change our address and things like that on the membership, but to like be updated to the point where we could be ordering groceries online and having them delivered, we had to go in and they had to do some sort of formal switch over with our account.
A lot of it comes down to .com and .ca. So TaskRabbit, Costco, DoorDash, they have Canadian domains. And it's actually like a completely different system. But also, if you happen to have an account on any of those ones that I just mentioned, you will also have an account on .ca, but it will be a completely different account, usually with the same email address, but a different password. It's wild.
Right. It's like they try to merge it as much as they can, which almost makes it worse because you don't know where the seam is. So when things break, you're like, wait, why did it break? I've been trying to spend less with Amazon in general, but there is some sort of divide between .com and .ca. It's the same
For
account.
availability?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely difference in what you can get shipped where, but also like my account, like it all looks like one account, but sometimes if I'm logged in with like my Canada address, I can't see purchases that happened in the US, and like just little things break.
It reminds me of the internet in like 1999. You know, if a page loaded, you were like, yeah! And I think that we've all gotten kind of spoiled in the US that most websites seem to work unless you're trying to buy a Switch 2. But here, that's not always the case. And maybe it is for Canadians, but it hasn't been for us. And so there's just been this kind of tech slowdown, which has been nice, actually. It was annoying at first, but I kind of like it now.
You mentioned the Nintendo Switch 2, and that was a funny little I'm living in Canada moment because it was this huge product release, both in the US and Canada, and it wasn't even the product, it was the pre-order day. So this product released for pre-order through certain retail sites and just kind of universally crashed the internet for those retailers. And, you know, our kiddo's a big gamer. I kind of had it in my mind like, oh, let's make sure we get one pre-ordered. She'll really want to, like, have her Switch when it releases.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited about the new Switch.
Yeah. I missed, like, the go live on Walmart at midnight because I was already asleep. But apparently that crashed out horribly anyway, so I don't know that I would have gotten one on Walmart. But when I woke up, I was like, oh, okay, so they're already sold out at Walmart. I'll just be waiting like when Best Buy opens. And sure enough, like I was on the site at like 9 a.m. when it went live, and just BestBuy.ca just shit the bed. Like the whole site crashed down. You could like get in a waiting queue. It didn't work. So I was sitting there at my desk and I was like, well, who else is going to be making this available? And I saw that GameStop was going to start selling it in store when the stores opened and wouldn't be selling it online for like another 2 hours. So I was like, well, I know where the nearest GameStop is. So I like hopped on the subway, went over, and I waited in line like it was like the 1990s when I was waiting for concert tickets. I waited in line with all the other nerds. And trust me, we were all nerds.
Didn't somebody shout something at the line?
Yeah. I've never seen so many stupid people in my life. And I was like, how un-Canadian of you.
That wasn't very polite.
Yeah. And so it was funny. Like, I got in line for it a half hour before the store opened. And then I waited in that line for like 2 hours. And sure enough, like I got to the front and I pre-ordered my Switch too. Like it worked. It was very old school. But I think that was really the only way I could have pre-ordered a Switch that day, was to go and just do it in person because nothing was working online.
I remember you told me that as you were standing in line, you kept having to remind yourself that they weren't constantly selling out online because all of the online portals were down. It was only the people physically standing in line, I guess, at GameStops, right? Like that was the only one.
Yeah.
And so if you were one of those people, and like how many people could that possibly have been? Like in the hundreds or maybe in the thousands? Not in the millions of people that would be flooding a website, right?
Right. I was on the Eastern time zone, so I was at the first stores that opened. Nothing was being sold online. Yeah, you do have this culture of when something becomes available online, you're like, oh God, it's going to be gone in like 2 minutes. And maybe that's only because I've dealt with so much of this gamer crap and it all just sells out instantly. Yeah. But yeah, if you're 5, 10, 30 minutes into something being for sale, you just get this sinking feeling in your stomach and you're like, oh, it's sold out. Like, it's obviously all gone now. But like, I waited in that line for like 2 hours and they weren't all gone because sales were only happening as fast as like human beings could help human beings. So that was interesting.
Well, the kiddo and I salute you, and I'm really excited. Do you want to talk about why it is that it seems that people in Canada are either so nice or so polite? Canada has a reputation of being really polite, and that is absolutely earned. And I would say that it has even exceeded what I expected when I first came to this country. We lived in Southern California for a long time, and we had Southern California native friends who would occasionally visit the Midwest and talk about just the unheard of level of friendliness that they would experience in the Midwest. And it was true. It's that on steroids here in Canada. Well, not steroids, on Quaaludes, right?
Yeah, Canadians make Midwesterners look just grumpy and rude.
Yeah. You know, why is that? It makes me wonder. How do you weave something like that into a culture? Is it an accident or is it intentional? I'm going to suggest that one of the reasons might be that Canadians aren't in emergency mode nearly like so many Americans are. There's a housing crisis in Toronto. There's a housing crisis in all major cities. And I mean, I guess you could argue worldwide. There aren't enough places for people to live. There should be, but there aren't. And so I don't mean to say that people in Toronto are not struggling. There's a lot of people struggling to afford rent and groceries, and these prices keep going up. But it's different in the US. It's been going on for longer. And I think so many people in the US are in emergency mode, not just living paycheck to paycheck, when paycheck to paycheck isn't enough. And so you have to hustle for community resources and mutual aid. It's more than a full-time job. And then on top of that, you have to work your part-time or full-time job if you can find one. But even then, the wages are going to be shitty and you're not going to get health insurance. It's a bad deal across the board. And I think when you're just trying to keep yourself and your family alive, I think empathy is just really difficult and maybe even impossible to muster. And so here in Canada, I think people have a little more emotional space to hold for other Canadians. This might change. I hope it doesn't. But it really does seem true. Like, we were in the park the other day and we saw a little makeshift fence of broken twigs. And we were like, oh, was this where the sacrifice was? And then we got a little closer and it was a broken wine bottle and somebody had put it there because you couldn't see it. And I would say that that's really pretty common, that people will like remove dangers or warn other people. You know, the nice person when you're in a public place and somebody drops something and like 30 people see it, but there's one person that scoops down real quick and picks it up and chases after the person to give it back to them. I really like being that person, but I got to compete for it here.
Sure.
Because it's just what's done.
And I remember before moving here reading about Canadian politeness, and, you know, there'd be, even in Canadian forums, people would be like, politeness isn't the same as friendliness. Don't confuse the two. They were trying to convince me like that it's surface level. They don't actually want to be your friends. They don't actually want to be helpful. They just want to give the like illusion of being friendly.
What's the difference between politeness and friendliness?
Politeness, I think, is the surface level stuff. It's the saying the please and the thank you and not being like aggressive in speech and things like that.
So politeness is performative.
Yeah, in my, that's the distinction I think people are making with that. Whereas friendliness is true, like, I want to be your friend. I want to help you as a person and like forge a relationship with you, even if it's just in this moment. And I've seen a lot of the latter. People just truly like investing in like your relationship instantly. For us, it's been neighborliness. The people like living on our block going ridiculously out of their way to help us.
When we were moving in, we had stacks and stacks of cardboard boxes, and I always feel a little bad discarding those things, because if they end up in a landfill, boo. If they end up recycled, okay, cool. But it would also be nice if they got reused. And so we were kind of like wrestling about what to do with these giant bundles of cardboard and had them set out on our front porch just as a temporary storage spot until we could decide what to do with them. And our neighbor from a couple doors down came and knocked on the door and said, hey, I've got a large item collection van coming, and honestly, I don't have that much stuff to put in the van, and they'll collect all of this up. Do you want to do that? And we were like, fucking yes. I don't think that anything like that has ever happened to me, where someone has said, like, I'm going to change the course of my day because it seems like the right thing to do for you.
This person didn't know us yet. He had to like go out of his way, come down, meet new people. That's more than most people can do, I'd say, is to like just walk out your door and be like, I'm gonna go meet some strangers. Much less be like, hello, strangers that I'm now meeting. Can I offer you this service that I'm paying for?
I think you and I maybe travel more than average Americans. We've also lived a handful of different places, which I think is also kind of unusual for Americans. We've lived in Missouri, we've lived in California, we've traveled to Japan, to Europe, we've tried to see other parts of the world and experience other cultures. And Canadian service culture reminds me most of what we saw in Japan. I think Japan is like the extreme version of this. I do kind of worry what the human cost of that in Japan is. Like the politeness is so extreme in Japan and so expected that I would like to know more about why that is. It's not quite like that here. It's more comfortable. In Japan, like, it honestly made me uncomfortable. I'd have to sit there and be like pampered.
It was an extreme politeness, but it was also not personal. And I'd say here that it's politeness, but it's like it's personal
That's a good
for
point.
you. Part of that might be because of the language difference. In Japan, you just can't go as deep when English isn't like your native language. So it's easier to communicate here and like get to know people a little bit more. Japan, the politeness feels expected. Here, just people feel like genuinely interested in you.
And I think this might come back to holding emotional space. If you have more patience, because you don't have so many things to worry about, then you can reserve a little bit of that for social grace.
And there are people who have like enough emotional space that like days and weeks later, they think to themselves, oh, I could do this to help these people that I just met. And we've had people send us resources. We had a neighbor we met in passing find out that we had a 13-year-old kiddo, and he like sent his niece of the same age over to like see if she wanted to hang out.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, like weeks later, it was like, oh, I remember meeting these people and here's something nice I could do for them.
I haven't lived a place like that where people decide to make space in their schedule for the new person. Mm-hmm. My experience typically has been that people have their routines set. Their kids have sports. They have their clubs that they go to. They watch a show on Thursday nights together. There's not room to fit new people in there. And I think part of it is a big city. Part of it is Toronto because it's a city of immigrants. And part of it is this culture. And it has resulted in, I've never been overwhelmed with information about a new place coming from my neighbors. But that was a situation that we found ourselves in, and not in a bad way either. It was just like, wow, we have all of this information and we didn't have to go looking for it. Having a starting place is really great, especially on stuff like healthcare, finding a school, because these things are really different than the US. So I'm really thankful to our neighbors here in this community for helping us settle in, for helping us feel more at home, for helping us learn the processes of being Canadian.
Inevitably, we're meeting a lot of new people. It does not take very long for the conversations to turn to politics. Essentially, oh, you're from the US? Let's talk about what that's like. I'd say almost every interaction eventually gets to at least a brief political discussion, because there's almost always a reason for us to mention, oh, we're new here because we're trying to do something because we're new, or it just comes up. Either the person jumps straight to, congratulations, you're here, way to get out of that shit show. And then other people who are just a little bit more delicate in their approach will say, oh, what brought you here?
Yeah,
or
like they don't know.
or oh, did you move here for work or something like that, at which point it's like, oh no, we fled. We're here because of what you suspect we might be here. And at which point they then congratulate you. Oh, well, welcome. Obviously, the way we respond to those questions shows immediately where we are on the political spectrum, which aligns directly with most people in Toronto, I would say. I don't have any like fear of offending the random conservative Torontan. Like, I haven't met any of those yet. And everyone is just insanely curious. Some more so than others. We had a bank manager when we went to activate your debit card. There's no reason to talk politics with the bank manager. It's like the most professional transaction ever, but he could not resist. He like wandered over. He's like, from the US, right? And we're like, yeah. He's like, was it Trump? And we're like, yes, it was. And he's like, you could see his face. He's like, I knew it. I have yet to have any actual experience where I felt like I was being negatively judged for being American. Other people back in the States have asked, do they hold it against you being American? And I haven't run into any of that. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but because of how conversations go, they instantly know that we are not one of the Americans who voted for Trump. I think that's the screening question some people ask. Oh, are you here for work? They can gauge how exactly you feel about being an American right now. So as soon as they realize that we don't think that they should be the 51st state, that colors the conversation quite a bit.
Speaking of the 51st state, the tipping point of Canadian politics recently was Trump proclaiming that he was going to make Canada the 51st state. And man, if you want to piss off some Canadians, that was the shit to say, because the tariffs were bad enough, but that 51st state nonsense, that fired up the country.
That changed the entire political trajectory of Canada. That's not hyperbole.
Yeah, we were seeing here in Canada the Conservative Party gaining in popularity, and this was the Conservative Party that was not entirely, but somewhat aligned with Trump and the other tyrannical racists. I think the more socially progressive and liberal people in Canada, especially like the population of Toronto, was getting really worried about that. If you're queer or trans living here in Canada, it's generally not socially been a problem, at least in urban areas. I can't speak to rural Canada, and I know there are hillbillies here. Like, I have been told that there are definitely like Canadian versions of Billy Bob.
Yep, they've got their anti-vaxxers, they've got their gross conservatives as well. But then you also have a population of people who are just struggling and want anything other than the current ruling party. And in Canada, that slides you from liberal to conservative pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that there's an economic thing happening here, the same as it is a lot of places. Like, there's a major housing crisis in Toronto, and people really want that to be addressed. And in all the time that the Liberals were in power, they really didn't seem to make a lot of progress on this. And so if you're a Canadian voter and this is like the main issue for you, I can rationalize why you might be looking to a political leader who has totally different opinions. But here's what happened. As soon as Pierre Poilievre aligned himself directly with Trump, which happened almost at the exact same time that the 51st state bullshit happened, there was a complete reversal in the popular party here in Canada to the tune of like 20 percentage points in a week or two.
20 to 30, something like that. Like, it was going to be a conservative victory by a landslide. Trump said that 51st state shit and like gone, like vanished overnight and swung liberal. Not by much, but it was only a few percentage points. And Canadians were really confident going in. They're like, oh, the liberals got this. The polls say they're up by like 3%. And I was like, shut your fucking mouth.
You and I are like, here's a little advice from some shell-shocked election results watchers.
I was like, you don't ever look at those fucking polls. I was like, do not get comfortable. And like, I was a little shell-shocked, like watching the Canadian election. I was like, I know everyone's confident that the Liberals got this, and that's really cool, but like, I need to see that. I need to see that in print. And indeed, the Liberals did take it. They didn't take a majority, though, so they're going to have like an uphill battle in terms of, actually legislating things. But that's what happens when you actually have more than two parties.
The fact that there are more than two parties, the fact that there is more representation in government here in Canada. Canada is far more politically nimble in terms of public opinion because they turned that ship so fast when they realized that they were about to be part of like Trumpville. And I'm not saying that they were going to become the 51st state. I'm just saying Polyev was parroting Trump and Trump was poisonous. Which, of course he is. He's a poison, but that hasn't happened in the U.S. yet.
He was a poison in the U.S. and they still elected him. So yeah, it is nice to see that Canadians can assess new facts and make new decisions and act on them. So that's cool. Canada's not out of the political woods. Like, if we know anything, it's that we don't want Canada to become a two-party system. And this election really played more like a two-party system election. The other parties are still out there, but like I would hate to see but
with some damage.
Yeah,
I mean, the New Democratic Party had stepped down because they performed so poorly in this election.
So I'd hate to see Canada slide toward a two-party system because we know that does not work out. I guess there's always this like fear that I just moved to like the US 15 to 20 years ago and then I'm gonna like watch its fate play out in Canada. I really hope not. The election gave me a little bit of hope that the Canadian people can look at the facts right in front of them and act accordingly.
Here in Canada, there's a safety net for trans and queer people. There's also just way, way less guns. Guns are more or less illegal here, and there are guns.
There are hunters.
Yeah, and there is gun violence. It's just really, really rare. Those two facts, I am pretty sure that I'm not going to get shot. Also, that I am in a larger culture that has like this cushion for me, that will stand up for me. I feel that they will. Toronto will stand up for me as a trans person and my family. I felt it a little bit when we lived in California, just because it's so socially progressive there. But it never felt like this. It never felt like I'm excited to go be outside in a group of a bunch of queer and trans people and not feel like I have a target on my back. That's new.
Yeah, people talk about like stabbings here, and I have to try to not be like the jaded American, where they're like, someone got stabbed, and I'm like, that's awful. Stabbings are not shootings. Like, do you know how like much less damage you can do with a knife than a gun? Yeah. And like that's like such a morbid thought to have, but I swear to God, your apples are better than our oranges.
In general, the reaction that we have gotten from people that we've talked to about the state of affairs, both politically and socially and financially in the United States, haven't been understanding or concern or even anger. The reaction that we've gotten more than anything else, what would you say it is?
Confusion. Yeah, people are confused.
What?
Yeah.
We were with a friend this morning having coffee, talking about the state of the U.S. healthcare system, and we got off on a tangent about how much does a procedure cost? Which asks that to American, and they're just like, come on.
Oh, I don't know, and I'll never know.
How could you know? That doesn't happen here. And the peace of mind that creates, we're not permanent residents yet, by the way. Canada could choose to kick us out. I hope they don't.
Can we close out this podcast with a really important question?
Yeah, it's the question of the day. We talked a lot of politics, and that was pretty heavy. So let's talk something a little more lighthearted. My Canadian friends, why is the handle on the bottle of maple syrup so tiny? If you know, please leave me a comment and tell me. It is scarcely functional.
Maybe you're supposed to wear it as a necklace.
That's Lori, and I'm Clover. We'll see you in the next one.